The guard riding the horse was struggling to maintain his stoic expression as a careless U.S. tourist persistently provoked his calm mount for a photo. He waited impatiently for someone to intervene, but what he didn't expect was for the horse to take matters into its own hooves. The animal seemed to endure the woman's antics, keeping a close watch on her as if waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then, in a surprising turn of events, the horse delivered sweet revenge. As the woman leaned in closer, a collective gasp escaped the onlookers. The horse's reaction was swift and unexpected, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Laughter bubbled just beneath the surface as the crowd struggled to contain their amusement. The horse's retaliation was something no one anticipated, but no one was more taken aback than the woman herself, who blushed with embarrassment and quickly tried to flee the scene. The horse had certainly given her what she deserved, and the spectators found joy in the outcome. Even the royal guard chuckled quietly in the background. However, this was not the end of it. The woman had broken the rules. The guards were determined not to let her slip away unscathed. Why had she felt the need to annoy the animal? What made her think she could escape the consequences of her actions? The moment was heightened as the royal guards prepared for their famous changing of the guard ceremony. Tourists had been lining up outside the United Kingdom Royal Palace for up to an hour, eager to capture the event on camera. While this spectacle had become a significant attraction, it also irritated the guards. They could tolerate the usual crowd, having been trained to withstand a great deal of annoyance, but the same could not be said for the horses. The animals were not as resilient to the tourists' incessant poking and prodding, and it seemed they would soon regret their lack of consideration. The guard on horseback, still trying to suppress a smile, glanced at his mount, who appeared to be processing the events with a mix of irritation and disdain. This day would go down in the books, not just as a day of changing the guard, but as a lesson in respect for both the animals and their handlers. As the guard regained his composure, he steered the horse toward the woman, ready to address her inappropriate behavior. The onlookers watched with bated breath, curious to see what would unfold next. The encounter was not just about a misplaced photo op. It was a reminder that all creatures, no matter how majestic, deserve respect and should not be treated as mere props for amusement. Among the gathered tourists was Margaret, a 32-year-old woman vacationing in the UK with her boyfriend, Lyle. They had explored many of the country's top attractions and were now at their final stop before returning to the US. One of Margaret's bucket list items was to take a picture with a royal guard, and she was determined to make it happen. The classic photo with one of the guards would be the perfect souvenir to share with her family. Little did she know how this wish would unfold. Due to the increasingly intrusive behavior of tourists, the royal guards had implemented a designated route to prevent crowds from obstructing their path. This decision came after a troubling incident a few months prior involving a little girl left unattended while her mother attempted to capture a photo of her with a guard. Unbeknownst to the mother, the guards are required to maintain their march, and the situation escalated quickly. The mother, believing the guards would simply stop or maneuver around her child, had positioned her daughter directly in their path to get the perfect shot. When the guards approached, they had no choice but to continue their march, nearly stepping on the girl in the process. They shouted for the mother to move her child out of the way, but she failed to react in time, leading to a chaotic scene. The incident sparked outrage, with complaints pouring in from the mother, witnesses, and those who later viewed footage online. Though the royal guards acted within their rights, the negative attention and the hassle that followed prompted them to erect barricades to better manage the crowds. However, these measures did not completely eliminate the problem. As Margaret and Lyle approached the area, Margaret's excitement grew, oblivious to the recent tensions surrounding the guards. All she could think about was capturing that perfect image. With the barricades in place, she felt a surge of determination. Nothing would stop her from achieving her goal. But with the memories of past incidents still fresh in the minds of the guards, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of unease. The royal guards, maintaining their stoic demeanor, continued to march, but the uneasiness in the air hinted at a brewing conflict between their duties and the tourists' relentless pursuit of the perfect photo op. As Margaret prepared to step closer to the guards, she had no idea that her well-meaning desire to capture a moment might lead to unintended consequences. Margaret stood at the front of the barrier, frustrated by the distance that stood between her and the royal guards. She was acutely aware that crossing the barrier was prohibited, but the thought of missing the perfect photo pushed her to the brink of recklessness. What would the guards do if she jumped the barrier? She resolved that today, she would take her chance. As the clock struck 12, the much-anticipated changing of the guards was set to begin. The gates of the palace swung open, revealing the guards ready to take over for their weary colleagues. Cameras flashed as dozens of tourists, including Margaret, captured the moment. Yet, as she reviewed her pictures, she realized none were satisfactory. She needed something more iconic, like the sight of a guard on horseback leading the procession. Little did the mounted guard know, he was the focal point of Margaret's aspirations. The sight of a royal guard in full regalia atop a majestic horse was precisely the image she had envisioned. However, she worried that the rider wouldn't come close enough for a decent shot. Fueled by impulsive determination and with her boyfriend's camera in hand, Margaret made a split-second decision. In a bold move, she jumped over the barrier, ignoring the warning signs and the eyes of the onlookers. As she rushed toward the unaware guards on horseback, she inadvertently sparked a chain reaction among the other tourists. Seeing her leap the barrier emboldened them. Many began to follow suit, convinced that if she could do it, they could too. Chaos ensued as the barrier became a gateway for eager tourists. Margaret pressed forward, her heart racing with exhilaration and fear. She knew this was a risky move, but the chance to capture that perfect photo overshadowed her better judgment. As she approached the guard on horseback, she could hardly contain her excitement, oblivious to the fact that she had just crossed into a world of potential trouble. Meanwhile, the guards remained focused on their duties, unaware of the unfolding frenzy. The atmosphere grew tense as more tourists climbed over the barriers, pushing boundaries in pursuit of their own ideal snapshots. What had begun as an innocent desire for a memorable photo was quickly transforming into a chaotic scene that threatened to disrupt the solemnity of the royal ceremony. Margaret's actions sparked a chain reaction among the crowd. One by one, dozens of tourists jumped over the barriers, eager to rush towards the gate where the royal guard had just emerged. The guards quickly noticed the commotion, and as more royal guards stepped out to restore order, the situation escalated. Many tourists attempted to snap pictures with the guards, adding to the chaos. In a surprising turn, Margaret began assisting the guards, attempting to push the rowdy tourists back behind the barrier. Unbeknownst to the guards, she was the instigator of this chaos. Margaret hoped that by being helpful, they might allow her to stay near the entrance. To some extent, her plan worked. Her efforts in calming the crowd earned her a grateful nod from one of the guards. Eventually, the guards insisted that she return behind the barricades, but they inquired about her position. With a smirk, Margaret lied, claiming she was right near the entrance. As she stepped forward, a sense of smug satisfaction washed over her, raising eyebrows among those who knew she hadn't been there originally. Yet no one dared challenge her. The barrier had been breached, and she had successfully slipped into the inner circle. She signaled to her boyfriend, Lyle, to get the camera ready, fully aware of her intentions, even if he didn't entirely agree. Meanwhile, behind the still-closed palace doors, the royal guards were engaged in a serious discussion about whether they should even emerge that day. Some argued for increased precautions, suggesting they clear the plaza to prevent being overwhelmed again. Such actions would send a message to future tourists that their reckless behavior would have consequences. However, most of the guards opposed these measures, believing it undermined their authority as royal guards. Trained for years to perform their duties, The guards felt they should not be intimidated by a few overzealous tourists. They were committed to maintaining their tradition and presence, prepared to handle any disruptions with the appropriate force and authority. As Margaret prepared to capture her desired photo, the guards were equally determined to uphold the dignity of their post, ready to confront any challenges that might arise. Little did she know that her quest for a memorable moment was about to intersect with the steadfast resolve of the royal guards, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test both her boldness and their professionalism. The guards returned to their starting positions, and as the doors swung open, they stepped out with renewed confidence. This time, however, there was a change in the lineup. The guard on horseback hesitated, preferring to take his place at the back of the queue. Still shaken and annoyed by the earlier chaos, he believed that by avoiding the front, he could attract less attention. His assessment, however, would soon prove incorrect. As the guards began their march from the palace, the crowd's reaction was one of surprise. Murmurs spread through the tourists as they questioned the absence of the guard on horseback, the very figure they had come to see. Fortunately, the tourists refrained from jumping the barriers this time, maintaining a semblance of order. One by one, the guards emerged, and cameras clicked rapidly as tourists captured the moment. Amidst the frenzy, Margaret remained vigilant near the exit, fully prepared with her plans. Initially, she was dismayed that the guard on horseback wasn't leading the procession. The thought that he might not come out at all threatened to ruin her perfect photo opportunity. Just as frustration began to set in, she caught a glimpse around the open door. In the distance, she spotted the horse waiting patiently. It dawned on her that the guard was likely going to make his entrance last this time, and she could wait for him. This development might actually work in her favor. If everyone maintained their distance, the guard might not expect her to make a move near the end of the lineup. Meanwhile, the guard on horseback was nervously moving forward with the line, dreading the moment he would face the crowd. As he prepared to step out, it was evident that all eyes were on him. The instant he emerged, flashes erupted in his direction. While the bright lights no longer blinded him, they were distracting enough to make him scan the crowd for Margaret. The guard was acutely aware that she was the instigator of the earlier chaos, and the fear that she might pull another stunt weighed heavily on his mind. When he didn't see her immediately, he hoped she had left voluntarily or had been escorted away by fellow guards. Little did he know that she had almost been rewarded for her earlier actions and was now standing just out of sight, plotting her next move. As the tension in the air thickened, both Margaret and the guard readied themselves for an encounter that would bring their paths together once more, setting the stage for an unexpected confrontation amidst the ongoing spectacle of the royal guards. As soon as the horse took a few steps out of the front door, Margaret jumped over the barricade once again. While the guards were trained to expect disruptions, they had assumed she was there to assist them and had let their guard down. Before they could react, she had seized the horse's reins and was already posing for a photo that Lyle was trying to capture. The guard's blood began to boil as he saw Margaret holding onto his horse. He noticed the animal growing increasingly agitated at her grip, and at that moment, something snapped within him. He shouted at her to get off his horse, but his words fell on deaf ears. Lyle, caught in a rush to take the perfect shot, fumbled with the camera. Margaret, however, was in no hurry. She clung tightly to the horse, determined to get her ideal picture. The guard realized he would have to explain himself if he physically removed her, but then a mischievous idea struck him. If she was holding the reins so tightly, he could use that to his advantage. With a swift signal, he urged his horse to dash forward. The well-trained animal obeyed without hesitation, catching Margaret completely off guard and sending her tumbling onto the ground, flat on her face. As she lay there, disoriented, the horse stood over her, its rear end raised in the air. Unable to hold back, nature took its course. The horse began to relieve itself right above her, and Margaret's screams echoed through the crowd. Onlookers couldn't help but chuckle, including Lyle, who smiled at the unexpected twist of fate. Perhaps this incident would serve as a lesson for his wife about respecting boundaries. Lyle quickly put down the camera while Margaret found herself in an incredibly embarrassing situation. The crowd had anticipated something entertaining would happen when the guard yelled at her, and many had their cameras ready. Clips of Margaret's mishaps spread online, showcasing her self-absorbed behavior, and the internet quickly erupted in laughter at her expense. Margaret's desperate pleas to have the footage deleted fell on deaf ears as videos of her humiliation circulated widely. The online community reveled in her misfortune, branding her actions as deserving of the consequences she faced. Despite the initial shame, the experience ultimately prompted a change in Margaret. She began to see the error of her ways and recognized her past shortcomings. Determined to improve, she vowed to treat everyone with respect and as equals moving forward.